Hello and welcome to Attenborough Arts at Home. My name's Dee Barnes and I'm going to be teaching a Candlesticks in Clay workshop with you today. You should have received your box. If it hasn't arrived yet, just be patient, it will turn up in the next couple of days. We're just going to open them up now and I'll talk you through what's inside and explain a little bit about the tools. So let's open it up. Okay, let me just put it to here. So we've got some acrylic paints, set of paints. We've got 3 paint brushes. Oops, let's get those out. 3 different sized paint brushes. We've got 2 kidneys, kidney shaped for obvious reasons. One's rubber, one's metal, and the metal one's quite sharp, so be careful. Just watch out that you don't catch your hand on that, or if you've got any young kids around, just be careful that they don't grab hold of it. It can be a little bit sharp before it started to get used. I'll show you how we use those as we go along. There's a sponge. You've got a lovely set of boxwood tools which will last you a lifetime. I've still got tools that I had 30 years ago because they don't really wear out. So I'll talk you through those. We won't be using all of those today, but it's really nice to have a set anyway. You've got 2 beeswax candles, and if you've ordered the vegan box, you'll have non-beeswax candles. You'll have vegan candles. And also, most importantly, you've got your pack of air dry clay. So let me just put the box to one side. And there are just a few little extras that you might want to gather before we get going, things that you might have around the home which you'll find useful. One is a little glass or pot dish with some water in. I'm going to be using this, which is called a whirler. It's like a turntable, and it's quite useful when you're teaching, so I can show you different sides as we're going along, but you don't have to have that. In fact, when I was making my samples, I didn't use this whirler. I've also bought in a wooden board to work on. If you've got a piece of cardboard or not a plate, breadboard maybe, little breadboard, something that's not too absorbent would be good. So maybe a magazine perhaps. Anyway, see what you've got around and what works for you. If it doesn't work, just put it to one side. Work straight onto the table. So I'm just going to pop that to one side while we look through the tools and materials. So if we just open up the bag of clay. So your paints we can put to one side for now because we're going to use those later, and I'll explain how we use them and mix them. Fairly obvious. I'm sure many of you have used paints before. And the brushes can go and sit with those as well. Now I've taken the clay out of the bag. You can either leave the clay in the bag and just take out what you need, or to make things a little easier for you, I would grab a plastic bag, some cling film, something that you need to wrap your clay in when you're not using it, because it will dry out in the atmosphere of the room. So I've just got a little bit of plastic here. I'm just going to place it in there. I'm going to take a little bit out, and we'll just talk through some of the tools before we get going. So as you can see, this is the air dry clay. It's made up with nylon fibres, and if you pull it apart slightly, you'll be able to see kind of like a little fluffy edge. That's the nylon fibres, and it reinforces the clay, makes it really strong. That's one of the reasons why it doesn't have to be fired in a kiln. Most clay, ordinary clay, does get fired in an electric kiln or sometimes a gas kiln. The clay I normally work with is called earthenware, and it's red. And if I show you an example, here's one of my candlesticks. If you look on the base of that, you'll be familiar with that colour. It's like a terracotta, and that's what you'd see garden pots made of, bricks, etc. So you can also have stoneware clay, which is very similar colour to this air dryer clay. It's grey. When it's fired, it goes this kind of like sandy colour. And it's fired to a higher temperature. Earthenware is low firing, stoneware is a high firing, but these are kind of technical things you don't really need to worry about too much. Useful to know if you're going to hopefully go on and do some classes, you know, if you've got any local to you, some pottery classes in the future. But you don't need to worry too much about that in this workshop. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about, I'll put the candles to one side as well. The sponge we'll use later. Again, I'll show you why we'll be using that. Let's have a look at some of these tools. So, as I said, I mean, the tools I use most, I probably have about 3 or 4 favourite tools which I use all the time. And I will just point out that I'm a hand builder. I don't use a wheel. I can use a pottery wheel, but for my practice, I either use a press mould, that's how I make my plates and dishes, or I use coils. And that's the technique that you can see around on some of the pieces that are around us today. Everything else is coiled or, you know, slabbed, I suppose you'd call it as well. So my favourite tools are this one with the teeth. You'll see why the teeth are really important on a wooden tool. And there are some tools with teeth different angles. Again, I'll show you why they're important. This one with a flat end and a round end, really useful as well. And you can also, you know, you can use them for mark making in the clay, or just simply by, you know, using that one as like a kind of wooden knife type thing to score and cut into. That's a nice one as well. That acts like a kind of pencil or pen. Nice and pointed. But, you know, I mean, these tools are a luxury. They're great to have. I have taught many workshops with a lollipop stick and a cocktail stick, so you can be as basic as you like. So it's nice to have those anyway. The kidneys, these are smoothing tools and kind of binding tools. The metal one is used for scraping up clay and creating a flat surface, a flat and smooth surface. And the rubber kidney, it compacts the clay, so it kind of smooths it over again, but it gives a really even sheen to the clay, so it's a lovely finish. The air drying clay, you know, it's obviously, if you've got small children around, you don't want them putting it in their mouth and eating it, but it's not poisonous. And you can simply just wash it off your hands with warm water. You don't need to use anything else other than water. Right, so I'm just going to cover up my clay with some plastic while I just set up my working table. I'll put the tools to one side. I'll put those there actually within reach. My kidneys, I'm just going to get rid of that. Pop that down there. And bring in my whirler and my little wooden board. Okay, so I've got my tools around me. Right. So I'm just going to talk through what we're going to be making today. The techniques that we use are slightly different, obviously, to what I will call real clay, but it will give you a wonderful introduction into the techniques that you can use using real clay when and if you can get into a workshop somewhere. And I've chosen to make some candlesticks because A, they're pretty, and B, they're practical. So one of the differences when you're making using air dry clay is that It doesn't really shrink, which is quite useful. Normal clay does shrink, and earthenware tends to shrink about 10%, and stoneware, I'm not sure how much it shrinks. Something similar, but I don't use it, so I'm not quite sure. But there is always an element of shrinkage with normal clay, which can be really tricky when you're measuring and trying to get things to fit, like candles. So that's an advantage for us, so we don't have to worry too much. Basically, what we make, that's the finished result. So I've made 3 pieces that are at different stages. So this is the air dry clay dried. It gets quite a lot lighter, which is good. This is a candlestick. You can see the grey underneath, and I've just put 1 layer of white acrylic paint on top. And then this one I've decorated with some other colours as well. And that's hopefully what we're going to achieve today. I'm going to show you how to make these 2 different candlesticks. So I've got my clay wrapped up in my cling film or plastic bag or whatever. I will also say, if you're working in a room that's really warm and you've got really hot hands, your clay will dry out quite quickly. So just keep an eye on it. If you feel like it's starting to crack a lot and get really difficult to work with, you can just put a little bit of water on your fingertips. But I'm sure it will happen to me, so I can talk you through it when it happens. So to begin with, I'm just going to pull off a little bit of clay. I'm going to make the base of the candlestick. It's quite sticky, but it's better that it's soft rather than too hard, because if it's too hard, it's really difficult to work with. So I'm going to basically get a lump of clay. I mean, I haven't worked out kind of weights or sizes or anything, so you'll just have to kind of see how it looks to you and work it out for yourself, which I'm sure you're capable of. If you feel like it's not enough, just pull a bit of clay off the large lump and add it to it. So some of the techniques that we can use with air drying clay, we can't use with normal clay. And for us, that's an advantage today. I'll explain as we're going along. So I'm going to start by, I've made a piece that's round, like that. You can also do it like this. So say you grabbed a piece out of the bag, you can do that. Make it round. And it can be, it doesn't matter if it's got little marks on it like this, because we can just smooth those out. And on your surface, I want you to just kind of flatten it out. Now, ordinarily, I suppose I would use a little rolling pin, but we couldn't fit a rolling pin in the box. So you haven't got a rolling pin. So I've made these just with my hands and the wooden tools, so that we're working on the same piece with the same equipment, apart from the whirler, that is. That's more of a teaching aid, really. So I'm going to squash it out and try and make it as round as possible, as in that way round. If you're not sure about that, oh look, we can use the sponge to make it round, or you can grab something from the kitchen, a cup or glass or something, and just kind of like put it on top. I haven't got anything here to use, but you could just rest it on top and just see. But I mean, I didn't do that with these. I just kind of judged it by looking at it. So I'm just kind of pushing it down like that. And I think we're going to start off, making, let's do this one first. So there's my base. I'm just going to push down with my fingertips like that. Doesn't matter if it's bumpy. At this point, I need my reading glasses. Right. Oh, a whole new world has opened up. Okay, so we're going to make this ball shape next. Now, the difference between air drying clay, the advantage is it's not going to be fired in a kiln. So we can have solid bits of clay. It doesn't matter if there are any air bubbles trapped inside it. If you were using normal clay and you were doing a globe like this, I'd probably make it hollow. but you don't need to with air drying clay because it's not going to be fired. So what I want you to do is grab another piece of clay. Actually, what I might do is that centre piece, that piece that's down here, I've cut away with one of my wooden tools. Not yet, but we can do that. But I'll just show you how to make that little foot ring there. So if you get a little piece of clay and you're going to roll it in your hands, and it's kind of like a smaller version of what we've just done there. And I'm literally going to just turn it round in my fingertips. I'm kind of just squeezing it very gently to make a kind of 2p piece size that's about 1 centimetre thick. And I'm going to sit it on there like that. Okay? Now we can use one of our lovely tools. Let's see, which one shall I choose? One of my favourites, the one with the little teeth on. And I'm going to use the teeth and pull down like this, all the way round. Now this is obviously something there's a lot of crossovers with using air dry clay and ordinary clay. Joining is one of them. You've got to be able to join each piece to the piece below, otherwise it will just fall apart when it's dry. So it doesn't matter at this stage, it will look rough, but we've got time to tidy it up. So I've just kind of like smoothed that round with my finger. If you've got really long, fancy fingernails, it's tricky. My nails are quite long actually. Best potter's nails are to cut them really short. But see how you get on. If you find your nails keep digging in and making marks, then cut them off. So I'm just going to use this tool. This is a nice round smooth edge, and I'm just going to go round that piece that I've just joined. So the idea is that you can't see the join that you've just created. Okay, so we're going to do the bulbous part. I'm going to grab some clay. I mean, this pack of clay, you'll be able to get at least 4 candlesticks out of it, so 2 pairs, which is great. So I'm going to roll it round like this and make it into a ball. And I just compare it with that one, it's a similar sort of size. So if you were doing a pair of candlesticks and you wanted them absolutely identical, you could make these 2 sets of each as you're going along so that you can work out that they're very similar. But I'm just doing one, so I'm not going to do that. I'll try and make it as similar to that as possible. So you've got your piece. Now we want a tool where we're going to scrape. We want it to scrape. So I'm going to use that one with the point on the end. And what we want you to do is just to score it like this. It's like a crosshatch. And I want you to do the same on the ball. Doesn't matter whereabouts. You're going to crosshatch it like this. If your clay feels a little dry or it's flaking, you can just put your fingertip. That's all you need. Don't go overboard on the use of water. You'll end up with a big sloppy mess. So my advice is, water is only used in a very small amounts. So I've just literally dampened that down. So I'm going to score that and I'm going to join that on there. I'm going to sit it on like that. And I'm going to kind of turn it round. So I could sit down here and have a look at that from a lower angle. So I've sat it on. Now we have to join it. So I'm going to get that lovely little tool again with the teeth. So we're going to use the teeth of this tool, doesn't matter which end, and I'm just going to support the ball with my other finger. That's one of the things when you're working with clay, you really have close contact with your hands and the material. That's why it's very sort of therapeutic and relaxing. It's a slow process, but you're always touching the clay. And, you know, it's tactile. It's a tactile material to work with. So I'm just going to do what I did before, and I'm pulling up with the teeth of the tool up onto the ball that you've just sat on, and holding it with my finger so I don't, if I was kind of like just doing it like this, and I could easily just knock that piece off, so that's why. And also, I don't know if any of you have watched anybody throwing on a pottery wheel, but if you ever watch the Great Pottery Throwdown, and you watch that introduction where the guy is throwing on the wheel, you'll notice that his hands work in harmony with each other and the clay. They're all kind of like supporting each other. And so it's really important to do that when you're not working on the wheel, but just hand building as well. So I'm just going to use my fingertip to smooth off that join. So it's quite kind of tacky and sticky because it's wet, but that's not a bad thing. And actually, let's try one of our kidneys. Should we use the rubber one to start with? Let's just see. I might have to, no, I think we're going to use the metal one. So when we're joining, this is a great scraper. So we're going to scrape up like this, all the way round. I'm just going to lay that on its side so I can see it in profile. Okay. So my end result might not be identical to that one, that first sample, but I'll try to make it as much as I can. We've got our base and ball shape on top. We're going to get another piece of clay. Now all the marks you can see in the ridges we'll do at the end when the clay's hardened up a little bit. At the moment we're just going to build the column. So I want the next piece, which is going to be this section here. So let's get some clay. Roll it in your hands again. And again, similar to what I did before, I'm just kind of like pinching it round like we did on the first section. I'll make it slightly sort of taller this time because it's going to fit on there like that. So you get your tool and we're going to score it cross hatch like that, and the same with the piece that you've just made. Little dab of water and place that on top. Now the difference between working with this air drying clay and normal clay again is that if I was building this, say it was similar to this kind of thing that I've made, I would be coiling it all. And we're not coiling today because we don't need to. It's a slightly different technique. And in some ways it's great because it makes it a little bit more accessible. You know, you don't have to, learning how to coil can take quite a long time to practice. So with this, it's quite immediate. So we get our little toothy tool again. Just going to pop my finger on the top there to keep it steady. And I'm going to just pull it down from the top all the way down onto the ball underneath, all the way round, like that. So it's kind of looking quite nice and messy. And then we can have a little look at our tool selection. I'm probably going to use that. There's a few of them that have got these kind of round, smooth tops, so you can use any of them. Just break off any clay that's dried on it, otherwise it will leave a horrible mark on your work. And we can just pull the tool round like this. Just drag off any bits that go onto the tool like that. Just pull them off. And I'm using quite a delicate touch. I'm not putting too much force on the clay because you don't need to. So we're just going to work round and take it off. So as I said before, I mean, I'm standing up and I'm looking over the top of the piece so I can see that it's straight. If you're sitting down and working, you can always hold it up and then you see it's really not straight. But you can manipulate it to be straight. So I can see that here it's quite flat on this side and it's sticking out on that side. So what I can do is get a piece of clay and literally just squish it on like this. I'm going to patch it, okay? And I'm just going to blend that piece in that I've taken and put on to make it a little bit more symmetrical. Like that. Now let's have a look. And you can just kind of like push it with your fingertip to make it a little bit more even all the way around like that. If you see a bit that's sticking out, just press it in slightly as you're going along. So now we're going to work on the next ball shape. So I'm going to grab a piece of clay, cover up what I'm not using, roll it in my hands again, and make it into a round ball shape. If you get little creases like this, you can just smooth it over, but we're going to be playing about with it when it's on the piece anyway, so any marks like that will come out. Okay, so I can just put it on top and have a look, see what I think. Like that. So I'm going to do what I did, repeat again the scoring, pull off the dry bits of clay that are on your tools, doing that cross hatching, and on my piece here, repeat, little dab of water. It acts kind of like a glue almost, the water. But don't be tempted to use tons of it. Okay, and I'm going to sit that on. I'm looking over the top of it down to the base, and I can see it's quite even that way round. And I can look, if I sit down and go a bit more eye level, I can see as well. And I'm going to get my wooden tool and repeat the same procedure again. Now, if you were feeling really adventurous, you could keep on doing these columns up and up and up and make it as tall as you like. There's a piece here, I'll just show you this piece. So this candlestick that I made, it's coiled, it's not made from solid pieces like this because I've used earthenware clay. But you can see, you know, you could literally keep going and make, well, you can't with the amount of clay we've given you, but if you were to get more clay and you really enjoyed the process, you could make some really tall candlesticks. So we're just showing you the basics, and then you can take it wherever you want to take it. So we've got that piece. Now let's just have a think about this. So I've given it like a little collar on that original piece. And I think what we'll do is we'll make that collar. So if you get a little piece of clay and you roll it in your hand like this, okay, you can either roll it in your hand and or do it straight onto the table. So I'm just going to put this to one side and roll it onto my table with my hand I'm just using my fingertips to create a little kind of snake. But if you don't want to roll it on the table, you can just roll it in your hands. And I'm just going to wrap it round the middle like this, like a little scarf. Like that. And these little kind of like embellishments, I've done that a little bit more on this one. You know, you can take it in whatever direction you want to as far as kind of adding little bits on. Because the more you do to it, the more interesting it becomes. So I'm just going to leave that piece on, but I'm going to blend it down. So I want the top, I want to be able to see that top. So I'm going to get my tool and I'm just going to pull downwards like that. I can already see it's going to be slightly different to that. I find it really difficult to sort of copy exactly the same things, but it's called artistic license. I think we'll allow that, won't we? Hopefully you'll be doing your own style on your own candlestick anyway. And I'm going to just smooth that round. Where you've got the little join, can you see just in here, you can see where I've joined the ends. Well, I haven't joined. There's a little spot where they're not joined, and you can just get your tool. You might want to get, let's have a look at these, something a little finer like that one, that little pointed end that's curved. That's quite good for getting in, and just literally tiny little movement to get that over and joined. And then I can bring that all the way round to tidy it up. So I've created like a little ridge or a lip. On the piece. Now it's looking really scruffy, so we can just tidy that up. You can either use your fingertip or the edge of your finger, like that. And just pull off. You can see it starts to dry on your hands. And as you're kind of moving it round, you can see, let's just have a look. Oh, it does look quite different to that first one. Never mind. Oh, that's a good little useful tool. This one, I'm going to use it to pull up like this. All the way round to tidy it up. You'll find the right tool for whatever it is that you need it to do for you. So you need to wait for the clay to get a little bit hard before you can really work on the surfaces. And depending on how warm your room is, this is firming up a little bit on the base. So when I've cut this pattern out here, it was much drier. And this little ridge here, I'll show you how to do that. So if I want to create the ridge in the base, let's have a look. Which tool shall I choose? I think I'll choose that one for now. Let's have a go and see what happens. So I just stuck the tool in and dragged it round like this. Just pulling it out to give it a kind of accented base. Like that. We'll deal with this section in a minute when it's dried a little. You can just smooth it around with your fingers, and you can keep on refining those shapes. You can do grooves in it if you wanted to. In fact, that might be quite nice. And that'll show you what the different tools can do. But I'll just finish building it first. So we've got our two main balls of the structure. We're just going to do this top piece here. So what I did there was I got a smaller piece round in the palm of your hands, and I want this to remain kind of rounded. So if I just put it on there like that, you can see how it sits on. And we'll do the same crosshatch again on both pieces. Tiny dab of water, and I'm going to sit that on there and looking straight down over the top of it so I can see that it's all in line with it, with everything underneath it that's sitting underneath it. And I'm going to join that with my, you do have to pull the clay off. Let's just pull that down. All the way round. Let's tidy it up with the back of that tool, that curved bit. I promise you, when I was making these, I didn't use the whirler, so I know that you can do it without having this. I was just doing it straight onto, I think it was onto a piece of cardboard, and I was just moving it round on the cardboard. As I said, it's a good tool for teaching because I can move it quite quickly so you can see what's going on. But don't feel like you have to have one of these. They're quite expensive, whirlers. They're like 40, 50 quid, you know. So if you're just kind of doing it for the first time, you don't want to splash out. If you really, get into it and you definitely want to sort of invest in your clay products, a whirler is a wonderful tool to have. Again, lasts forever. So there we have that one, and as you can see on there I've got an extra ring, so I'm going to make another little coil, small piece of clay, roll it in my hands like that, and I'm going to wrap it round. Oh, that's a bit big, that one. Let's make it a bit thinner. Let's break a bit off. Roll it out a bit thinner. If you want to make it really even, you can do it on the flat surface. To make your ends neater, you can just chop the ends so that they're flat. And then I'm just going to wrap that round there. Put its little scarf on, just nip that in. It is very soft, this clay, so you won't have any problems joining it. And again, a bit like the one underneath, now we have to join it. So I'm going to get my teeth, but I don't want to lose the shape of that coil. I don't want to blend it in, so I'm going to kind of dig the tool in underneath so that it's got that join that's made it secure, but it's not going to fall off when it dries. But it's maintaining the shape of that piece you've just put on. And then I'm going to get my flat edge, just run that round, or you can use your fingertip to get rid of the marks, like that. And I'm going to do the same on the top, so you can see there, you can see the join. And I often say when I'm teaching, if you've never used clay before, there's no reason why. This is a nice simple technique, so there's no reason why this can't look really professional, really good at the end of it, or what you've made. And a lot of that comes down to this bit, the tidying up, the sort of attention to detail. And you'll probably have seen, if you watch people making pots, Obviously on a potter's wheel, things are almost immediately smart. When you're building things by hand, there's an element of kind of quirkiness, I suppose you might call it, slightly that handmade look, which if done properly can look really effective. At least that's what I tell myself when I make my work. Don't know what anyone else thinks, but okay, so I'm just going to get the tool underneath so you can't see that join. Like that. And now we're going to make the little bit that the candle sits in. Right, so we're going to do the bit with the where the candle sits now, collar. So if you grab a little piece of clay, and I think we'll make it into a ball again. Roll it in your hands. And what I want you to do this time is we're going to kind of pinch. I'm pinching more in the middle than I am on the outside. And I'm going to start pulling it up like this. I'm pulling up the edge that was slightly fatter that I'd left. So I'm kind of making a little cup shape. If you have a look at that. You can, I think I'm going to put this on now and carry on doing that movement while it's actually on the piece. So with your pointy stick, we do the same cross hatch again. And on the base there, bit of water. I'm going to sit that on top like that. So if I just show you, oh dear, that's completely off centre. So if I just move that over slightly, but we'll adjust that when we join it. So if I just put my a finger on it, get my serrated toothy tool, and we'll just pull that down. All the way round. It doesn't matter at this point if it's wonky, because we'll cut it down. And I'm just pinching that top edge, angling it slightly sort of upwards, so it's like a cup shape-ish. Now I want a little, let's have a look. I think we'll use that one again there, that's got that curve. We're going to go all the way around and smooth that off. Now this bit, at this point, I'm going to get my candle. I'm going to use one of these dinner candles because, to be honest, this is the kind of candle that's readily available in the shops. The beeswax candle were a nice treat to have in the box as part of your package, but you know, you can buy those, but they're slightly slimmer. So anyway, I'm going to use this one because I want to, if you haven't got a normal candlestick, you obviously would use your beeswax one. Let's do it with both. And what I want to do is kind of press down. Ooh, that's made a big dent in it now, look. I'll show you. That's made a big dent, so, and I've made it slightly wonky as well. I'm going to just push that down like that. Swivel it round a bit. Like that. So I know that the candle's going to fit in it when it's dry. Ta-da! That's lucky it stayed up. Let's gently take it out. And Let's have a look at this from the side angle, see what's going on. So it's kind of frilly. We can cut that down when it's a little bit firmer. But I also wanted to show you some mark making. What I was thinking would be quite nice is if we did scored some lines in this. So you can just take your tool. I'm using that one. I suppose you could use any of them that got like this sort of knife edge to it. And I'm just going to score in to the clay a pattern. Obviously, you don't have to do this pattern. You can do anything you like. You can add some little balls of clay to the surface. You can leave it completely plain, and when we come to paint it, you could paint some pattern on it instead. Or you can score into it like this. I'm not really one for measuring things out. I kind of just tend to see what happens and where it takes me. And luckily, it all added up and all the lines fitted in. So with your wonky top edge, you can either keep pinching out the bits that are lower and leave the bits that are higher so that it all kind of like matches up. Or, I mean, you know, it's not a pristine thing, so it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit quirky on the top edge anyway. I'll just show you very quickly the foot. It doesn't really matter which tool you use, but what I did was I just did some diamond shapes, no, triangle shapes like this. So I cut in like that. So I'll make a few marks. I cut it away all the way round. Just makes it a little bit more individual and a bit more special if you've got this kind of thing going on the foot. But again, you know, you can choose any shape you want to make. You could make a wavy line, or you could leave it plain, or you could cut it away at a different angle. Okay, so that's like that. If you wanted to, you could just push with the edge of your fingertip or one of the tools, just push in so it's not quite so pointy and sharp. All the way around. So you could literally spend hours fiddling around with the surface of your clay. It's lovely and relaxing, and as long as you don't scrape away too much and leave some of the pot left, you'll be fine. But you can have a play around with some of your tools. That one's quite nice with a sort of little foot, a flat foot, for sort of getting in and creating that little ridge on the bottom of the candlestick. Just taking away small bits at a time and tidying up those edges. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, can I get that off my board? That's the point, I can't. So I'm going to put that to one side, and I'm going to teach you how to make this candlestick now. It looks like it's more simple, in some ways it is, but I want to show it to you because I want to show you how to make these shapes. So I'm going to get rid of my whirler for now, clear some space, and get some clay out. So I'm kind of showing you two different candlesticks, but obviously, as I've said before, you can make any shape you like. So I've got quite a large piece. This is going to be for the central, let's bring this one around, for that central column. So I'm going to create a kind of fat sausage shape, which I'm going to roll out. Let's move those out of the way. Just rolling it out on the table. And what I want to do to get this kind of tapered finish is, so it's kind of like a straight column as it is now, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll only the middle section. And it ends up looking a little bit like that, so it goes slimmer in the middle, just there. And then you can tap it on the table. Like this. Tap either end. I mean, it is quite soft, and then I'm just going to roll that again like that. So it looks more like a kind of tree trunk shape. Like that. In the meantime, the other candlestick's drying, because before you paint them, you want the clay to be dry. Now, so this is bone dry, and it would normally take about 24, 36, 48 hours to get really bone dry. If you sit it on top of a radiator, that's quite good, or in a warm place, an airing cupboard or windowsill in the sun. And, you know, you can see the change in the colour. So that's how you can tell when the clay is dried out enough. And you can paint it before. It won't hurt it, but the paint doesn't go on as well when it's the clay's wet. When it's dry, it becomes absorbent, so it sucks in the paint better. You'll get a better finish. So that's my column. I'm going to grab some more clay and make a base. We'll just sit that there. I'll start off again with rolling it in my hands to make a kind of ball shape, which again, like we did originally, I'm going to flatten. Just turning it round and round between my fingers and just squeezing gently like that, like a kind of pincer movement with my thumb and fingertips. And I'll tell you how I can get this off. So if you've got your candlestick and it's stuck to the surface of whatever it is you were working on, you get the metal kidney and you just slide the kidney underneath the piece. It'll come away. One good use for the metal kidney. And I'll put that back on. I'll bring the whirler back in now. So I'm going to do a similar base as I did before by squashing down those edges and making it into a rough circle like that. And you can kind of push the clay around a bit to get it round. I mean, you don't have to do it round. You could do an oval shape if you wanted, or a square base. You could do an oblong. You could make it up as you go along. That's entirely up to you. Then I'm going to get my pencil tool and I'm going to scratch off cross hatch again like that. I'm going to get the column and I'm going to do the same with that, scoring into the clay, making it rough so it's got something to adhere to. Fingertip in the water on the clay, and then I'm going to squash that onto the base. Then I'm going to get my toothy serrated tool again and just pull down all the way around. Don't worry if you change the shape, you can always add some clay where it's indented and fill it in. But the most important thing is to make it secure. And then you can just use your fingertip to smooth it down like this. And bring back that kind of tree trunk shape again. So say here you've got it and it's not quite right. You can just get some clay and roll it out on your hands again and just stick it on like that, because the clay is so soft anyway. You can just smooth it down now with your fingertips like that, blend it in. And you can do that wherever you kind of see a bit that's not looking quite right, where it's indented. You can just add some clay to it, build up the surface again. And at this stage, we can even create the little bit where the candle sits. So I'm just pinching out. Let's see if I can show you that. I'm getting my fingertip and my thumb, pressing the thumb inside the centre of the column and gently kind of squeezing the edge so it kind of flares out like that. But what you can do is get a candle, press the candle in, and you can actually just pull the clay around the candle shape like this. Oops. Bit lopsided, but oh, I forgot the candle stand. Oh, there we go. Phew. So it looks like that. Not very attractive at this stage, but we're going to work on that next. So where it's got kind of like a bulge there, I'm just going to pull down with my thumb. This is why long fingernails can get in the way when you really want to be working with the little pads on the end of your fingers quite a lot with clay. So I'm going to leave that to one side because I want it to dry out. I'm going to show you how to make the, hang on, we need the, let's get that on again. Might be a little bit harder to get off because we've only just put that clay on the surface you're working on. Okay, let's put that to one side to firm up a little bit. And I want to show you how to make these shapes. So what I did was I got a piece of clay. In fact, what you can do is, so that you kind of get it semi-accurate, I'm going to take off 3 pieces of clay in 3 different sizes. So you've got a slightly larger piece, medium-sized piece and a smaller piece, okay? So let's start with a large piece. Roll it in your palms again. Fingertips. And what I did was I made them, instead of it being round, I made it like an oval shape like this. I mean, you can make them round, you can make them any shape you like. Let's do that to each one. I can make it flat on both sides, so probably about slightly, maybe 4 centimetres. No, not centimetres, millimetres. Slightly less than a centimetre thick. And this one, again, you're going to do the same with each one. You can start it off as a round and then manipulate it into like an oval shape, because if you look at the shape of those, they're kind of going up the column. So I'm having it like that. So there's my 2 pieces. And the last one. Make that slightly ovally. So there we have it. There's your 3 shapes. Then if you get your metal kidney, I want you to slice each one down the middle. Just stand above them, if you have a look. And we use the metal kidney as opposed to a wooden tool because it's nice and fine, acts more like a knife. And the last one. In the middle. Like that. So you've got your 6 pieces. And then what I want you to do is we'll bring back the column. And you can spend, I'll just pull my chair in. So let's just have a look at this. You don't want it to get too dry because then it makes it difficult to add pieces onto it. So don't leave it for too long. You're literally sort of putting it to one side while you're making your pieces that you're going to add to it. So what you want to do is get one of your tools with the serrated teeth end, and we're going to score up one side like that. So to make sure that you've got your wings, let's call them wings, equally on both sides, what you want to do is stand up, and where you've put your lines on one side, if you just hold your tool in the middle of the column, then you'll know that where to put the other score marks on the other side. They should be halfway across from each other, like that. So what then you could do is the same on your, so obviously you get the larger piece, the larger half, dab fingertip on, and I want you to just place it on the side like this. Make sure when you're looking down the top, over the top, that it's in the middle. It's not sort of like too far forward or too far back. Any dry bits of clay that come off your hands, just pull them off. So that's one. Now I want the medium sized piece. Do you know what? I didn't actually measure to see if they're all going to fit. But hey, look at that. So let's take the next one, score it, dab of water. I'm going to put that one directly above, in line with the one below. Oops, it's a bit sticky. Like that. I'm just going to push it on for now. We'll join it in a second. And the last one, again, score it. Doesn't really need any water, but I'm going to put it on anyway. And push it on. And if you look above and look straight down the column, you can see if they're lined up or not. Then you can go straight onto the other side. So we're going to score it again. Dab of water. Now, if you want to sit down and watch so that they're, at that point, they're even, then you can also stand up and have a look down over the top to make sure that it's lined up that side as well. I mean, what you could do another set and have those on this side as well and have a really fancy candlestick. the choice is yours. You can make it as fancy or as simple as you like. Right, let's put the other two on. So we've got that one, score it. It's getting a bit fluffed up. That's why you have to pull off the dry clay, because it bungs up the forks and the tool. Bit of water. I'll sit down to have a look at that. And the last one, let's pull off that clay. Dab of water, and we'll pop that one on there, like that. Okay, now we can join them. So I think I might use one of these tools that's got this kind of knife shape to it. Let's just see how we go. So I'm going to just pull that in and kind of grabbing a little bit of the clay that's on the shape and pulling it onto the column. It's a very small amount, because I don't want to see any join. Like that. And then I'll do the other side as well. Let me have a look at my shape tools and see if that's the best thing to use. I think it is. I think that one's got the same. Yeah, that's the same. So I'll keep using this one. I'm just turning it upside down so it goes where I want it to go. And I'm just going to pull the clay onto the column again. So it catches it. Like that. Again, we can tidy it up as we're going along. And just make sure that they're all still kind of in line with each other. And then you're going to do the same on the other side. So just grab a tiny fraction of that clay and draw it down onto the column underneath. And actually, this is where you can use your rubber kidney. This is ideal for if you want to grab, use that flatter edge. Actually, you can use the curved edge. No, the flatter edge works better. And just pull it round. You've got to hold on to the column, otherwise it's going to fall over. See any gaps? And by using the soft rubber kidney, you can really smooth the surface. I mean, I've got a little bump there. I'm just going to fill that little bump, a recess, I suppose you'd call it, not a bump exactly. I'm just going to fill it in with a little blob of clay and then go over it with the kidney. Et voila, it's gone. So that's what I mean, you can kind of like keep adding to it as you're going round. Let's do it on this side. Actually, I can't do it that way around, I need to have it facing me. Sometimes that's the beauty of having all this choice of these different tools. There's something there for every little job that you've got to get done. You just have to find out which one it is that suits the job you need. Okay, so they're all joined. Now, this is what I did to create the gap in between. If you get this pointy one, of course you could leave it like that, it looks quite nice. It's a little bit like, oh no, I did put holes in that one. Oop, better cover up my clay. Don't forget to cover it up when you're not working on it. So if I just show you this one, I did a similar thing. So this is my earthenware, what I've called real clay, candlestick. And obviously I've created lots of different holes. This is much smaller, so I haven't got as much surface to play with. So I'm going to take this finer end of the tool and I'm going to stick it through. I've put my thumb on the back, look, to support it, because if I don't, I'll push the whole candlestick over. So I've put it on the back and I'm going to push all the way through like that. So at the back you've got this messy bit and at the front you've got the neat bit. So if we do that all the way along, I'm supporting it on the back as I push the tool through and at the base. Oops. Like that. Yes, you've got your messy side, we'll deal with that in a minute. I'm going to do the same on this. Always support the clay that you're working on. Go down to the next one and the one at the bottom. Now I could leave it just like that, which looks quite effective. But what I did do to make these finer was I cut away. So I'm using the tool to kind of scrape out some of the clay. And what happens is you see it starts to become a wider shape. So where you've got these messy bits at the back, what you can do is, if we get the metal kidney, we're just going to use that to slice those off. I'm going to slice them off like that. Oops. Slice them off. And then you can see this one has started to, I've started to create a bigger space within the shape, and I can do the same on each one. I'm kind of, I'll show you this way around. So what I'm doing is I'm putting it in and just pushing the clay around a bit, taking out any excess. I'm using the pointed end of the tool to kind of cut away at the clay that we've added, like that. Kind of carving into it really. And you can continue to do that and make them as fine as you want. Tidy it up. I mean, if the clay is very soft and it's kind of bending all over the place, just leave it for half an hour unwrapped in the room and it'll firm up and you'll find it easier to work with, especially when it comes to carving away. Okay, so I'm just going to work on this side. Kind of pushing the clay around, digging it out. And you'll find that as the clay gets firmer, it's easier and easier to sculpt, almost. it's tricky when it's very, very soft because it's so delicate. Well, it seems more kind of vulnerable when it's really soft. But for carving, it's better when it's firmer. So if I... Oh, I'm already getting... And what happens when I work is I'm working on something. I haven't necessarily got a plan of what it is I'm going to make. As I'm working on it, I think, oh, let's just do that. Like I just had quite a nice idea. Like you could get one of your tools. Let's see, which one do we fancy? That one. Let's hope this works. And we could actually just push in. I'm just sticking that end of that tool. I know it's altered the shape. We'll pull them back in a minute. I'm just sticking the edge of that tool in to create a kind of ridge along the edge of the shapes we've just made. I'm supporting it. Can you see I'm holding each piece as I stick that wooden tool in like this. So it's not altering the shape too much. And then of course I've got to do it on the other side. Of course you don't have to do this. Like that. And then I'm just going to get the tool back in and just pull that shape back out again. Just line them up so they're all equal. Turn it back and front. So you can make pairs of candlesticks. As I said before, there's enough to make at least 4 pieces. Or you could do 4 individual ones. Now that you've got the kind of basic skills and understanding of how the clay works and the tools, you could make 4 completely different ones, or you could make one really big one. It's entirely up to you. You can have some fun with the clay. Right, so now the top is a little bit weak. I'm going to just add a coil onto that. So I'm going to roll the clay in my hands again. I might just roll it on the flat surface. And I'm going to score the top because it's got a bit dry now. So I've roughed it up like we have done in the past. I'm going to get my coil that I've just made and I'm just going to sit it on the top of that shape and wrap that little coil around it. So it looks like that. Now I want it to be flat, so what can we use? I might just use my board. Or I suppose what you could do is just turn it upside down. Just tap it really gently on the surface. And I'm going to pinch it out now to create a kind of bigger lip for the candle to sit in. You bring your candle over, just push it into the shape again to make sure it still fits. And you can trim, when it's firmed up, you can trim that top off to make it neater. So the other thing, the base, which is kind of like a fleur-de-lis type shape. So the base here we've got is firming up, which makes it easier to carve into. And all I did for that was I got one of the knife type shapes, and I'll cut in here and I'll turn it round to show you. Like this. So I did a kind of, it's got 4 petals. So I'm just cutting out triangles. And taking the triangles away. Like that. That's it's in its rough state. And then I carved those shapes. I made them round rather than have square edges. Like that. So this is carved round. And then what you can do is if you want to neaten up the base, you sit that sharp edge of the tool flat onto your surface and pull it round underneath the shape that you've created. And it gives it kind of like a little edge. Like that. And I'm going to do the same on this one. I'm going to cut away so it's rounded. And that one. Like that. Push it in a bit. And then I'm going to get that tool, put it flat to the surface, drag it round underneath on the base. And that kind of gives it the illusion that it's slightly raised up at the same time. Let's have a look. And then you can just soften off the edge with your fingertip, round it like that. And I think on that one I also repeated that same shape. I've given myself less clay on this one, this sample I'm showing you today. But I could still create another shape if I wanted to. Or I might repeat this pattern. That's what I'll do. That will look quite nice. If I get that same tool, which was that one with a little, was it that one or was it that one? Yes, it is that one with like a sort of square-ended foot. And you could stick that in there. Push it in all the way round. So that it matches the pattern that you've got going on up at the top of the candlestick on the sides. All the way around. I mean, as I said before, this kind of like manipulating shapes and adding patterns and textures, you could go on and on. And don't forget, we can add an extra layer of decoration when you come to paint the piece as well. Okay, so let's just leave that to harden up. Okay, so we are now going to paint. I'm going to show you how to use the paint. And we'll have a look at the sponge as well. So if we just take the paints. Now, as I said before, this is something that you might want to do in a couple of days. So you might want to come back to the video and revisit this. But I'm sure your wonderful imaginations will assist you in deciding how you want to paint your piece. So I've got my water to clean my brush in between, and I'm going to use the board, but you can use a piece of newspaper or a card or anything to paint onto. And I just want to show you, so this piece I obviously just covered with white acrylic paint, and this one is the clay just dried out. So I'll show you what it looks like when you apply it. The reason I've given you acrylics is because they act almost like a varnish. You can buy varnish extra if you want to make your piece really shiny and probably more durable. You know, you can use any kind of clear varnish really. You can just Google that and buy it from anywhere. Doesn't have to be specifically for clay. There's lots of different types of varnishes on the market that you can buy. I'd probably use the back of the box if I wanted to mix colours. You don't need to have anything in particular. Or if you've got some scrap paper lying around, you can just use anything to mix your colours up on. Or you can just squeeze it straight from the tube. So I think I'm going to use the biggest brush because this is the surface I want to cover. So I'm just going to pour some onto the brush like this and just start painting it on nice and thick. Of course, you know, once again, I'm showing you white, but you can choose any colour. So with this one, it was painted white first, and then I went over it with a pale orange and a darker orange. And it dries quite quickly because, as I mentioned before, the clay surface is very porous. Once it's been painted, it's less so because of the nature of acrylic paint. But you can use any paint on this. You could use watercolour if you wanted to. Oil paints I probably wouldn't because they just take so long to dry. That's the nice thing about acrylic paints, is that they dry very, very quickly. And of course we've given you a set of basic colours, primary colours, and you can mix them to make any combination. So you would just go on to paint the whole piece. I would start off with white because it gives you a nice background to paint onto. The other thing I wanted to show you, let me just pop that in the water, was the use of the sponge, because I haven't shown you that yet. Now, the sponge is good for when the clay is sort of hard but not bone dry. You would simply just get your sponge, wet it, get it a little bit damp. And what you can do is, if you just brush it onto the edge of the clay, it just smartens up any kind of like lumps and bumps that you've got going on. You can rub it over the surface of the clay and it smooths off the surface nicely to give you a lovely even finish. So it's harder to use it when it's bone dry like this piece is. That is a little too wet to use, but you get the general idea. These little craft sponges are ideal for this kind of thing, and you can carry on using that. Don't get it absolutely saturated. It's just a little bit of dampness in the sponge, and you're just kind of like manipulating the surface with it. So I don't want you to saturate the whole thing with water. That might spoil it. And set that to one side. So I'm going to leave that one and just bring in this white one that I'd already painted. And I'm just going to apply a bit of colour. So I'm going to mix my two colours together. Now you might think, well, you know, why didn't I just do this to begin with? I'm not quite sure. There's something about having a white background to work on as opposed to the grey that gives me time to think about the colours that I want to put on the piece, and also it's a bit like having a white piece of paper, I suppose. It's quite nice to be able to have a blank canvas. So I'm going to mix in my yellow. Oh, it's getting stronger. I did say I was going to have it pale, at least I think I did. I don't really do pale colours, so I struggle to make anything a bit pastel-y. But think we'll start off with that kind of yellow. I'm going to paint the whole thing in it. Let's pop that down. And also, once you've got your white background and it's dry, the next layer of paint goes on much easier. I suppose it's a little bit like when you're painting in your home, you know. If you're painting directly onto plaster, it takes a lot of paint up. A bit like the clay. Whereas with the yellow, it's going onto a non-absorbent surface, and so it will go quite a lot further. Now, I will let you into a little secret. That is, on this one, the black is actually a Sharpie permanent marker pen, because I wanted a really fine black line, and I'm not very steady with the hand doing really fine black lines, so I thought, ooh, what can I use instead? And Sharpies are kind of very similar medium to an acrylic paint in that they stay permanent once they're on the piece. So I used that. So if you do have a Sharpie or a permanent marker pen, you can use that for your decoration as well. And if you have a steady hand, you can also use the paints that were in your box. Looks like a lemon sorbet now. So I'm covering every inch in yellow, including the little grooves down the side. And it's already beginning to dry. So I'm just going to wash my paintbrush. Don't leave your paintbrushes out of the water with acrylic paint on, because they will dry hard and you can't get the paint off. So it's very important that you always put your brushes into water when you finish painting, well, particularly with acrylic paints. It's not so bad with watercolours, but I've ruined many a fine brush by forgetting to put it in the water straight away. So I'm going to get my finer brush now, and I'm going to have some pale blue. So I'm going to put a tiny blob. I mean, these paints will last you years. We're using minuscule amounts on this work. So you'll have great fun using your paints for years to come, hopefully. Again, I've got the white. And I'm going to just put a tiny dash of blue on my paintbrush and start mixing it in a bit more, just playing around with the tone that I want to achieve of blue. I want it to be a similar tone to the yellow. It's kind of like a sky blue, I suppose. Maybe a little more. Let's see what this looks like on the yellow. I think I'll do this stripe here. almost looks lilac against the yellow. Pulling the blue up a little bit. If you have a finer brush, you could use that for some fine detail if you want to. These brushes aren't that fine, but what you can do is go over where it's kind of spilt over. You can mix up some more. I quite like that colour. I'm going to do that bit as well. And then I'll probably mix up some more of the yellow to cover up where I've gone over. Or I didn't want it to be. So you get the general idea. I mean, you know, I'm not going to give you a whole class on how to paint your candlestick with my colours, because you'll want to do your own colours, you'll have your own ideas about how you want the finished piece to look. So you get the general idea that, you know, we're mixing up the colours, you can put your base colour on, let it dry, and then start applying your patterns. Where you've got things like the groove in there, you can accentuate that with some paint. You know, the possibilities are pretty endless when it comes to decorating your work. And that's a very individual thing. That's one of the nice things about leaving your work to dry for a couple of days, because you can think about the colours as it's drying and look at the piece you've made and kind of like weigh up how you'd like them to be, especially if you've made a number of pieces like I have here. They look really good together as a little group. So I'm going to leave that to one side to dry, and I would probably add more to that as time went on. You want to wash your plate up, because again the acrylic paints will dry hard onto that surface if you're using a plate. If it's on a piece of paper, you can just screw it up and put it in the dustbin. Okay, so I really hope that you got something from that class. And obviously, you know, you don't have to make just one candlestick, or you can make anything you like, really, but it's given you a little introduction into clay and the use of clay. I can recommend some really great books, actually. Of course, there are literally thousands of amazing pottery books out there, but one of the ones that's really inspired me over lockdown has been this book, Mastering Hand Building. This is an American potter. She's called Sunshine Cobb. That is her real name, and you can find her on Instagram. If you just type in the word sunshine, she'll come up. And this is a beautiful book. It's got lots of illustrations in. She hand builds. She does work on the wheel, but predominantly she hand builds using coils, and there's some lovely little projects, very simple things. She is a master hand builder, and she's also put in some inspirational potters that she draws inspiration from herself in her own work. So that's been a lovely book to browse. And there's various others on there which I've had over the years. But you can just kind of, you know, you can look online for pottery books. If you want to look up me, follow me on Instagram. I'd be delighted to see you on there. My Instagram name is D Barnes Designs. That's DEEBARNES Designs. And that's the name of my website as well, which is www.dbarnesdesigns.com. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was, if you are really inspired and you desperately want to go and work with clay, which I hope you do, most cities have some kind of clay room, clay workshop, creative workshops. So you could just Google pottery classes near me. If you're in Leicester, I teach pottery to adults at the Attenborough Arts Centre, who are hosting these workshops. And you can look on their website and come along and join me in one of my highly informal but very intensely interesting pottery classes at the centre. And that's me signing off for now. So hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Thanks again. Bye.